two Pokemon sets that people keep talking about, whether or not they're dark horses, is Temporal Forces and Paradox Rift. Now, these are two fantastic sets from the Scarlet and Violet era, and both of these sets are what people see as a dark horse. Now, we got the obvious real big boomers out there with Surging Sparks, Twilight Masquerade, Paldea Revolt, and so on and so forth, and there are some sets which are not doing that great, in the grand scheme of things, like Scarlet and Violet Base, Obsidian Flames. But Paradox and Temporal are very, very similar, but also very, very different in the same respect. So today we'll be going through everything Temporal, everything Paradox. We could be comparing the two sets. We'll be going through the single card prices. We'll be going through the graded card prices of some of the biggest cards in the set. And on top of that, we'll be going through the sealed booster box prices in the market as well, and see where they both are, because they both release pretty close to each other. These aren't two separate sets. They're just, massive wide release windows. So we'll be looking at TCG Player today and PokeJace. Let's get into it. Okay, so starting things off, we're looking at Paradox Rift, the booster boxes on TCG Player. Now, of course, we looked at not too long ago all the different booster boxes, but pretty much a lot of the Scarlet and Violet era booster boxes shifted together towards that $200 range, and pretty much all of them went that route. Now, here in the UK, slightly different. Prices do vary, but right now, Paradox Rift you can pick up for less than retail for a booster box, so that's a pretty good one. So we take a look at this. We're looking at around about $200. So this is what I was talking about. The number of sales is dropping quite significantly as it's becoming less and less likely to find Paradox Rift, of course. So over the past 3 months, it has climbed up 30% in value, which is very, very impressive. And over the past year, pretty much this set has doubled in value. This was a very, very cheap set. A lot of it around, and not only that, there's a lot of Paradox Rift in collection boxes and tins, so in supplementary products, and that's actually a big factor on card prices, and we'll get to card prices in a moment, but keep that in mind. It is a large set as well, so you are going to have a lot tougher pull rates, as it were, to try and get the biggest hits, but still, Paradox Rift, in the grand scheme of things, there's sitting around $200 is still pretty impressive. Where do I see it go in the future regarding the booster boxes? Well, I mean, technically, it is still due reprints. Whether or not it will is a different matter. Let's say they do reprint the booster boxes. I do expect them to drop, only because I think the general feel of the set is not as exciting and appealing as some of the other sets. Now, when we look at Temporal Forces, we're looking at pretty much the same story, right? We're seeing $200 a booster box. We're seeing less volume of sales across the board. They're pretty much similar. That's what I mean. These two sets are like brothers. It's crazy how close they are. We go back over the past year or since the set came out, again, pretty much doubled in value. This was always a little bit more expensive than Paradox. This one did sit around that 100, 110 for a while, whereas Paradox did dip to like 90. So those are the differences there. But with Temporal, we did start seeing the tougher pull rates come in with Temporal Forces as well, and the introduction of A-Specs. So that was another interesting thing and a dynamic to how the different sets are. Interesting thing, it says here that this one's got low volatility for Temporal, but when we look at Paradox, it's got medium volatility. So keep that in mind between the two sets. But where do I think Temporal Force will go? Again, due a reprint. Whether or not it will have a reprint is another matter. Let's say it did. I do expect it to drop, but I think it will hold a little bit higher price point than Paradox. Only because, again, there's less Temporal in supplementary products as there has been with Paradox. And I also feel like there's just been less printed. I think there was actually less printed. I think they reduced the print run as well of Temporal compared to Paradox. Temporal was the first set to really start shifting things into different gear when we had like Twilight and Stellar and so on and so forth. So yeah, really interesting to see. I do feel like Temporal, though, might eke out a little bit ahead in the sealed product category. Who knows? We had this in Sword and Shield between Chill and Rain and Fusion Strike. Both of those sets were flying out. They were like brothers, back and forth in the value of the sealed product. Fusion Strike won it in the end. Okay, on to PokeJace now. We can see the values of the sets and the cards and so on and so forth. So we've got the overall value of the set at $977. This has actually dropped. It was over 1,000 maybe about a month ago when I filmed a tier list video. it is now fallen. I think it's fallen by around about $100 to $150 in value. So it has fallen, which is important, right? Keep that in mind. That is a really important factor when looking at this set. So when I look at a set and evaluate a set, I look at cards, like how many cards does it have over $10? Does it have many cards over 20, 30, 40, 50? And does it have a $100 card? And normally, I would say sets that either have a very, very big chase cards or a number of big chase cards tend to do quite well. And also sets which have an overall good amount of value spread across a lot of cards. We have seen that in the past with sets like Crown Zenith from the Sword and Shield era, which does just have a lot of value. 151 is another example of a good set that has a lot of value spread out. Of course, you've got the big Charizard, but outside of the Charizard, a lot of the cards in the set have a lot of value and it's spread quite nicely. Those are the things that I look at when I'm, evaluating a set. The Paradox Rift, of course, we have the Groudon coming in at $82. We do have a card that's over 50. In fact, we've got 3 cards over the $50 range. Good. There's no cards over $100. That's or $100 or more. That's fine. But we do have quite a few cards over the $20 range, mainly illustration rares, which is very key when it comes to Paradox. And then we go further down, we've got more cards, more illustration rares that do hold good value over that $15 range, especially over that $10 range. So let's take a look. So overall, how many cards have we got at basically over $10? So we've got 5, 10, 15, 20. So 20 cards in the $10 range, between $10 and $20. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards between 20 and 30, 1 at 30 and 3 at 50 plus. That's actually pretty good. Like, that's actually a good chunk of cards in the set. And like I say, it's those illustration rares which really do help. It doesn't have A spec, which actually is a bonus for Paradox because A specs are just terrible, especially when it comes to value, collectability, and so on and so forth. Like, if you're a player, sure, but honestly, it's not an appeal, all right? So overall, how do I look at the value of the set? Pretty good. Then we want to look at what Pokemon are in this set. Is there some big fan favorites in here? Because that does have a huge impact, of course. Now, I would argue that there are some good fan favorite Pokemon in this set. There are, especially when it comes to the illustration rares. Of course, we've got some new Pokemon being introduced as well, but I do feel like there are some real big heavy hitters in this set. Prime example is stuff like the Steelix is absolutely amazing. The Garchomp special illustration rare. Groudon, of course, big boy Groudon, huge fan favorite. I think there's just so much cool, unique art in this set as well, and people like it. So for me, I do feel like Paradox Rift is going to be a pretty good one. Do I feel like it has a potential to be a dark horse? I kind of feel like it does. It kind of, in a way, it does remind me, I would say a little bit like Chill and Rain, where Chill and Rain had a lot of alt arts that were just absolutely incredible. And I kind of feel there's just a ton of artwork in Paradox, which is also incredible. So this could give me that Chill and Rain feel. And we have a look at the Groudon to give us an example of not only just the raw value, but obviously the graded value of it as well. So we're looking at here, we're looking around about $80, like we say about raw. And again, look at that PSA price, $356 in a PSA 10. Absolutely huge. And it's doing relatively well. It's holding quite steady. We've got a big money card coming in there from the Groudon. And, some of these other cards, especially with the special illustration rares, they don't hold an insanely high PSA return value. I mean, this one here, the Altaria, over $200. That one has climbed quite heavily over the past few months in a PSA 10. The Roaring Moon, which was the biggest card in the set, $200, sitting quite nicely. Not too bad. Has fallen by about $80 recently. Then we look at the Garchomp as well. Awesome looking artwork. Huge fan favorite Pokemon. $160. Has seen a nice climb, but has also dropped very recently. And then with the Golden Cheese String, I'm not a huge fan of this one, but I know that a lot of people like it. $110, so not a huge amount there. If you look at some of the illustration rares, they do hold pretty good value. We look at the Steelix. Bear in mind, it's just a normal illustration. $166 in a PSA 10. Huge. Right? That is a massive amount of value there in an illustration rare. Let's take a look at the Yveltal. Again, another big fan favorite card. $164 in a 10. That big, huge climb that we saw, in fact, doubled in value. So, yeah, there is a lot of value to be had, especially in the graded section of this, and again, there's so many illustration rares as well. This set has that potential, and it gives me that chill and rain feel. Okay, on to Temporal Forces. We have slightly less value in Temporal than we do have with Paradox Rift, and this again has also dropped since the last time I reviewed this set when I did the tier list, by about $100 to $150. So this has actually fallen as well. So both sets have gone down in their overall value. This set, in my opinion, is a lot more heavy on the special illustration rares for its value, more so than in the illustration rares which Paradox has. Paradox, huge set, lots of illustrations. This is still a big set, but gone a slightly different route. So with this set, they kind of went with the ancient and futuristic theme, of course, to go with the Scarlet and Violet era. So you have the legendary beasts in various different forms. So again, looking at this set, how many cards? Over $50. Is there a card at 100? No. But how many do we have? Over 10, 20, 30, and so on and so forth. Paradox did relatively well. Like, we had quite a lot of cards with a lot of value. And even just looking at this right now, we can see that there are quite a few cards over that $50 range. In fact, we have 5 cards in this set that are over $50, whereas in Paradox we only had 3. So, a little bit better there. And every single one of these cards is a special illustration rare. So these aren't illustration rares, unlike what we saw, of course, with the Groudon and whatever from Paradox. We are looking at SIRs, which are harder to pull, of course, than to get hold of, an illustration rare. So, looking at the value of the set, we have no cards at $100, but we do have 5 cards at 50 or over 50. Then when we go further down, we can see we've got a few cards here over the 30 range, a few at the 20, and then quite a lot under the 20. So let's see what we got over 10. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We've got 14 cards between the 10 and 20 range, so a lot less than Paradox. Then we have 3 cards between 20 and 30, and 2 cards between 30 and 50. Okay, so overall, a lot less value to be had spread across a lot more cards. Yes, this set is a little bit more in the top heavy, especially with these SIRs, but still not like super top heavy. We're not looking at, something like if you go back in the past, you look at something like Champion's Path, where literally those 2 big Charizards and everything else is terrible. That is not really the case. We do have a lot of value to be had spread quite nicely across several special illustration rares. And on top of that, look, we do have a variety of cards that hold value. We've got a Full Art Gengar at $23. We've got illustration rares as well over $20. We've got the Ghastly at nearly $40. We have gold cards that are up there holding value as well. So, Full Art Trainers and stuff. So we do have a nice variety of cards in Temporal, which does help as well. So that is the value. So the value is kind of, in my opinion, a bit better in Paradox, mainly because of all of the illustration rares and how much value that is spread nice and evenly across a lot of those illustration rares. So the overall feel of the Pokemon that are in this set, are they big fan favorites? Yes, I would even argue there's probably more fan favorites in this set than there are in Paradox. You've got 2 big Gengar cards, right? Morty's Conviction and the Full Art Gengar. Huge fan favorite. I think a lot of people do like the look and the reception of the legendary beasts and their various different forms. Got Ghastly as well. So if you're a big Gengar fan, you're gonna love this set. This is like the Gengar set that we have. I mean, it's the closest we're gonna get to like a proper Gengar set anyway. Then we also have some nice illustration rares and just overall nice artwork. I kind of feel like the golds are a bit of a letdown, in all honesty. I don't think that this is really that exciting to have these gold cards, and I kind of feel like people would just prefer to have some of these, illustration rares, which are amazing, but they don't hold anywhere near as value as Paradox. And of course, you do have the A specs, again, as I was saying before, which kind of let the set down a little bit when trying to open the set and enjoy it and the pull rates and stuff. This is one of the first sets where it did introduce the A specs, and they did increase and make the pull rates tougher. So overall, I kind of feel like, for me, Temporal is my choice for a dark horse, but I kind of feel like Paradox could be the better performing set. I just have this feeling at the moment they're so close. Like I say, between the 2 sets, they're so close. But I don't know why. Part of me kind of looks at Paradox and looks at Temporal and was like, hang on a minute, there's a lot more overall value spread nicely across Paradox than there is, of course, in Temporal. Now, one thing I will say in Temporal, though, is I do feel like some of these special illustration rares might start to break away and see high amounts of value, potentially. And that's not saying that won't happen in Paradox, but if there's going to be a set that's going to do it, it's going to be Temporal. It's really interesting. But for me, I don't know, I think they're both very good, but I think right now, potentially, Paradox could have the upper hand on Temporal, but it's so close to tell. When we look at the graded prices of some of the big cards, we've got the Raging Bolt. We look at the compared to the Groudon, still $280, pretty good in a PSA 10. Has dropped a little bit, but it's still holding relatively well. Then we look at the Iron Crown, which was the most expensive card. We're looking around $167. That's pretty good. Walking Wake, one of my favorite cards in the set, $160, holding pretty well. And yeah, across the board, this set is like, you got that value there. Again, so similar. Look at these prices. These PSA 10 prices are so similar, right? We can look at the Garcia. I think it's one of the most expensive ones. Garcia here, like nearly $300. So those illustration rares are really tough to get in a 10. And we saw that, of course, the Groudon and so on and so forth. I mean, even just this full art Gengar. It's just a full art. $136 just for a full art. So yeah, there's some big money cards to be had across the board with Temporal, but so similar to Paradox. There you have it, guys. That is Paradox Rift and Temporal Forces. Super similar. Sealed products the same. The overall value of the sets so close to each other. Temporal just a little bit less. And then on top of that, you have the graded cards of the big top cards of the set. So similar as well. Like, top heavy is definitely Temporal. Temporal is definitely more top heavy. Paradox is spread nice and evenly, right? With all the illustration rares. If I had to pick right now which would potentially perform, I actually would lean towards Paradox, even though I personally prefer Temporal. I just think if I had to compare the sets right now on the data that we have, I think Paradox has the potential just eke out ahead, of course, of Temporal. I think both sets are fantastic. I do love both of them. And I do think that these type of sets are ones that people they do forget about, right? They really do. I remember talking about Fusion Strike being the forgotten set a long time ago when booster boxes were $90, £90 a piece. Nobody cared. They just didn't care. And it just got forgotten. It did. And it got forgotten for quite literally years. And then all of a sudden, it was the craze, it was the thing. And look where we are now with $500 a booster box. I'm not saying that these two sets are going to go the same way. But again, that happened with Chin and Rain. I think both of these sets are quite comparable. And I think they're quite similar in the way that they're mirroring each other, like Fusion Strike and Chin and Rain did in forms of value. But two completely different sets. Fusion Strike, top heavy. Chin and Rain, ton of alt arts spread out across the set. Two very different sets, but also very similar, like Temporal and Paradox. If you found the video and you've enjoyed it, make sure to smash the like button, make sure to subscribe for more Pokemon content, and let me know your guys' thoughts. Which one do you think is the dark horse? Do you think it's Paradox? Do you think it's Temporal? Let me know. I'm intrigued. That is it from me, guys, in today's video. For more Pokemon content, make sure to click the video on the screen, and of course, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You guys are legends, and I'll see you in the next one.